we've got, I think, a really exciting session for you today, a real mix of people that I guess support other people in terms of raising finance in different ways, as well as hearing from entrepreneurs themselves in terms of how they've raised finance for their organisation. So just to give you a rundown of what to expect for today, we're going to start off with Toby Sandison first, talking from Community Share Scotland. So delighted you're here with us, Toby, today. And then we're going to hear from Stuart. Stuart's joined us from Eigg Brewery. I always love talking about beer, so really looking forward to what Stu's got to say. And then we're going to hear from Brenda at Crowdfunder Scotland. So again, lots of really useful tips, I think, and bits of advice on how to look at crowdfunding there. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Louise Hastie at Lower Impact Living CIC. If Louise drops out and comes back in again, you can see she's probably in the car, so she's multitasking, as I think we're all used to doing at this point, but she will be with us, and we'll pick up on the Q&As even if we lose her briefly. So don't worry, if you've come to hear Louise and she drops out, she will be back. So thank you, everyone. Without holding back any further, I'm going to hand over to Toby. The sessions are recorded, just for everyone's information. We will post a recording and we will share slides with participants afterwards. So if you want to know the slides, as long as we've got your registered emails when you booked, we will send the slides out to you after the event. So thank you very much, and over to you, Toby.
Great, thanks Naomi, and good morning everybody. I'll just bring up my slides quickly. I hope everyone can see this okay. Can anyone on the panel just let me know if there's any issues with that? So like Naomi said, I'm Toby Sandison. I'm from Community Share Scotland, and to tell you a little bit about Community Share Scotland, we are a government and lottery funded organisation who we exist to sort of raise awareness of community shares and what community shares are all about, to provide training to the third sector and everyone in Scotland. But really the main part of what we do is to offer hands-on support and guidance to anyone who wants to issue community shares. So if after this presentation today you're really interested to learn more, you can see our three faces there. That's me and my two colleagues, Marvin and Lynn, and we're happy to have a chat about anything you're doing. Help you to understand what community shares are all about and help you to decide if this is a good, sensible option for you. If it is, we can then bring in, much more structured support. We can bring in up to 6 days of tailored consultancy to really look at developing your business plan and putting all the documentation in place that you would need. And we do also have a grant in place that can help with a share offer. But I won't dwell on these details too much today. I think I'll do quite a quick presentation just to give you an overview and to give you a sense of what some other people have used community shares to raise money for. So community shares, at their most simple, community shares are a way to raise money for community enterprises. They're essentially a form of crowdfunding where you're going out to your community, out to the people who support you, asking them to put their own money in to help you get started up or to launch a new part of your enterprise. Where they slightly differ from other forms of crowdfunding is that they also have community ownership built into them. So the people who buy shares become shareholders, they have certain membership rights, they have voting rights within the organisation, and they get to enact a certain level of influence over the organisation's future. So because you're asking your own community to put money in, and because this can be funded by anything that you can really convince a group of people to put money towards, it's a really flexible form of finance. It can really be used to fund anything that you can make a good business case for. So what we see a lot of in Scotland is a lot of shops and pubs. I think we've had 10 shops in the past few years, and we're starting to see more pubs coming along as well. Lots of different community centres, which I think I'll show you one later that's recently been funded. Lots of renewable energy initiatives, and then you also get some more unusual things like a distillery up in Dingwall, and you'll hear later from Stu who's used community shares to fund a brewery. So these are just some of the very key facts about community shares, and I'll be happy to answer questions later or to give you more information that's available. But these are the sort of key things you need to know. So to issue community shares, you have to be registered as either a community benefit society or a cooperative society. And we tend to mostly work with community benefit societies, They're very similar. They're both sort of member-owned, member-governed organisations. The slight difference is that a cooperative really exists for the benefit of its members alone, whereas a community benefit society has to demonstrate benefit to a wider community. And for that reason, the Community Benefit Society is a really good vehicle for sort of community enterprise in Scotland. It's eligible for a lot of the sort of community empowerment bill powers, such as community asset transfer, and it can apply for most grant funds and things like that. So like I said before, anyone who buys a share in a community share offer will become a member of that organisation. They will have the right to stand for election to the management committee. They'll get to vote for who does stand on the management committee, and that tends to work on a principle of one member, one vote. So it aims to be very democratic and to empower people within the community. It's not like in a private company where, if you have 1,000 shares, you get 1,000 votes. Everyone has an equal voice within a community benefit society. Community shares are withdrawable. That's the technical name for community shares is withdrawable share capital. So it's not like having shares in say Apple, where you buy them for £100 and they could go up in value over time and you can sell them to people. You can't transfer your share. The only way you can get your money back is to withdraw it from the organisation. So it's a bit more like having money in a bank account. And I think most share offers will have a business plan that will aim to start allowing withdrawals after, say, 5 years. It tends to be quite a long payback, and all those withdrawals are at the discretion of the organisation. So there's no guarantee that shareholders will get their money back. But a good, sensible business plan should be able to offer sensible withdrawal periods for people who invest. One of the great things about community shares, as well as the fact that you can raise big sums of money purely through community shares, they're also a really good way to attract further funding. And I think some of the examples I look at in the next few slides will show you, quite often groups are working with other grant funders, and community shares are making up what we sort of think of as the last piece of the jigsaw, in a way, where they've got X amount of funding from the lottery or from the land fund or another big funder, and then the community shares element just provides that little missing piece that they need to really get moving. So I'll move on to some case studies now. The first one here is the Loch Ness Hub, which is up in Drumnadrochit, up near Loch Ness, and they raised £110,000 last year in September. They were our first share offer to launch sort of after the start of the pandemic. Their community benefit society is registered using the DTAS hybrid model rules. So our programme is part of the Development Trust Association. We work really closely with them, and we've developed these sets of governing documents that are appropriate for development trusts, and it allows them to continue to have their existing development trust, which might be a charity or a company limited by guarantee, but it also has a very strong link with the society which issues the shares. Loch Ness Hub also received an award from the Scottish Land Fund, which helped them to purchase the building that they now operate from. So they've purchased the Visit Scotland site. They're going to adapt it as a community transport hub with electric charging points and vehicle hire, and they're also going to have a baggage handling service for people who do walks on nearby walking trails. The next one I've got is Raze Community Renewables. So they raised £665,000. They just closed their share offer a couple of weeks ago. And this is one of quite a few community energy projects that we've worked with. I think in total, you'll see the energy share offers that Community Share Scotland have worked with have raised over £6 million. I think there's now been 11 in total. Quite a lot of them are hydro schemes. This one is a hydro scheme. And it produces almost enough electricity to power all the homes on Raze, and all the profit after shareholders receive their interest and all bills are paid and things, all the profit will be reinvested locally into local projects on Raze. And the next one, the final case study I've got before I pass over to Stu, this is Common Ground Against Homelessness. So this is a group based in Edinburgh who work really closely with a homelessness charity called Rowan Alba. And they raised £715,000 that they've used to purchase a building in Edinburgh that they'll now use to provide what they call homes for life for 9 previously homeless men. So these are sort of supported living accommodation where people who've had a history of homelessness can get the help they need to really get settled into a home. And this was a hugely successful share offer. They were able to put together a business plan where they offered 5% interest to shareholders, really raised the money they needed in a matter of weeks, and they're already starting to plan their next share offer where they're hopefully going to fund a similar property for women. So that's my really quick run through, just to give you a flavour of what community shares are all about and how other groups have used them. And hopefully you can have some questions at the end, but for now I will pass over to Stu, who can talk about Eigg Brewery.
Thanks, Toby. And as if by magic, here's Stu, so we'll come to questions at the end. So over to you, Stu.
Thanks, Naomi. Hello, my name's Stuart McCarthy. I am the Isle of Eigg Brewery, or one of the Isle of Eigg Brewery's founding directors. You may have heard about us. We ran a crowdfund last year. We raised over 195,000 from over 600 investors in 6 weeks between the back end of November and a few days after Christmas. It was a welcome Christmas present. Like all good stories, our journey was rather convoluted, but I think in essence there were 2 stages, 2 main things that looking back now were essential. The first was preparation, and the second was crowdfunding itself. I'd say that the preparation time took 6 months full-time work. It was mainly myself, but also several other folk kind of linked in, but it needed to be project managed, and really that's what most of my pandemic time, or the first wave of pandemic, took up. The second part was the crowdfund, which was also full-time, and that took 6 weeks. We funded with that money that we're getting from 195,000. We've funded capital to be able to build a building. That was one of our first major issues. And also this will fund a bespoke brew kit and everything that we need for brewing, and the startup costs as well. But for us, there was a specific mandate for greenness. So we are funding an electric van. We're going to avoid fossil fuels. What I really see now, again with hindsight about this, is we've basically been supported to create a business that sets up something that benefits us socially, environmentally, and beerly. I guess is an approach similar to Kate Raworth's the donut economics, whereby we're not looking at a business that's focused on profit. Profit, of course, is part of it, but it's a business that recognizes its position in a landscape that's wider than just GDP. There were lots of challenges along the way. One, I mean, the main challenge is I live on an island, expect nothing to be easy. We got delivery the other week of a septic tank, and it took them 2 days to get the boat over here because the day beforehand there was 60-mile-an-hour gales. But it does breed a can-do attitude, I feel. One of the main problems that actually we began with was, how do you reach people? It did feel rather isolated being on an island, but really in many ways this felt like a numbers game. And it was sort of like the analogies that I was given was it was like an onion. So you begin with those close to you, and then you look for referrals outwards. You can reach one other person, but then getting that person to refer you to another person is almost a key. So we finished with 7.7% of people who went to our website investing. I think this is about average or sort of high average. But if you put that into numbers, that's 7.7% of people equated to about 605 people. So you're looking at hitting at least 15,000 to 20,000 people at least getting to your website, of which, as a numbers game pans out a bit, how many people you get to your website in the first place is a big hurdle. Beyond Scotland, we found that national newspapers were reluctant to run a crowdfunder story as well. They didn't really want to be promoting something that was happening rather than actually storytelling, which is their job. The second challenge, I'd say, is once you've got people's ear, how do you convince them to invest? We found that a mixture of positivity in a time of pandemic, what they themselves can get from investing, and what becomes because of them. And I think the last point was perhaps the most important part of that. To continue with challenges, the rake of learning in the learning curve is another challenge. It's a full-time job with social media, press releases, responding to people, finding the next day's injection. So practical steps on how to plan this. I think in terms of the background, really important to have a business plan with a clear value proposition. It's important to appear professional in everything that you do, from your social media to the booklets, to your share offer booklet, to how you're setting up your crowdfunder page. I also think it's probably quite important to build awareness in the months prior to the launch so that there are people there ready to go. With your marketing plan, you need to consider how you'll reach the numbers of people who you need to reach. What's the daily focus? You know, for me, I found it really useful to forget this large amount and actually just focus on a daily tally. And for us, that was £2,500. I guess the sort of progress, not perfection, was how we saw it. There's also, how do you work within what we were termed as the bathtub, where there's a large initial focus and media interest, which creates people moving to your site, and then there's a long period of time where you're at the bottom of the bathtub, and how do you get your daily amount from that? And we found the best way to do that was almost focusing on a daily basis. Was Twitter referrals were huge, so we ended up on BBC Six Music. Lauren Laverne referred to us, and that got a spike in Twitter, which then led to a spike in investments. We had a range of celebrities, I guess, if you can call politicians celebrities, who referred to and about us. So Ian Blackford tweeted, Leslie Riddick tweeted. We got support from Glenn Wivis as well, and being able to tap into their audience was huge. We had a daily social media update, and I guess the other side of this was it needed to be more than just passion. So, you know, what is it in for me if I'm investing? So we spent quite a lot of time considering what you get if you invest and how to kind of step people to just higher than the minimum. Because if you put a minimum out there, people will invest the minimum, but what you want is a larger share of input. Otherwise you end up with a lot more people investing, which is a good thing. There's also an administrative difficulty further down the line. So I suggest that the area of really importance, whereas I'm not probably being so important here, is clarity. You know, why will people invest? We focused ourselves on, as part of our marketing plan, on 3 specific areas. One was the local social benefits, one was the environmental positives, and the third thing was good beer. Now, the last one is going to pull people in anyway, but curiously, it was the other 2 that were really drawing in investors. People like good beer, but they're not necessarily going to invest in good beer unless it was immediately in front of them. Whereas the social support and the environmental benefits are something that they can tangibly contribute towards. We were also lucky with our positives before we even started. So the Eigg profile itself, with the buyout in 1997, and the successful, so 22 years success of community ownership, creating this Eigg brand, which is, I guess, broad in the world of community ownership. Our question was how to access this, and a eureka moment for us was that really what we were doing is extending the Eigg brand into a business sphere. And at the same time as well, during a pandemic, which is a fairly negative process, we were providing sort of positives, a positive story in a sea of pandemic, I guess. Our types of investing, we found in approaching to this that creating tension was really beneficial. So we started with a minimum of 125,000, and it was all or nothing. So the story up until that point, which drove quite a few people, especially during the end, where we jumped from about 80,000 to 125,000 in about 3 days, whereas previously it had taken us maybe 3 weeks to get to that point. It really drove people to be part of the drama. We had a minimum investment of £100 for our shares, with £250 for shares and something else. In this case, it was a T-shirt. We increased then to £1,000 for tax relief and some more beer. and then 5,000 for greater tax relief with SEIS, and finally a full brew day would be £7,500 with a maximum investment of 20,000. There are lots of folk. If you explore when you're creating your site, there are lots of people being really creative. Hackney Brewery raised over £40,000 by saying, if you put in £50, we'll double that. If you put in £100, we'll double that and put it behind the bar for you when you come and visit us. This way of tying people into going to your place and expressing more interest in your product and what you're going to be doing is something that Brewdog have been doing very well. The last section now before I pass on, what were our successes? Well, we made it happen, which was absolutely humbling and beautiful, delicious, as a friend of mine would say. We met loads of people on the way with similar mindsets, which will translate when we sell beer in the future, but it's again connections. We've begun to build a network of people who are promoting what we are doing. And also, before we've even got the building, before we're even making beer, people are also already offering advice and support. We have over 600 people invested, which to me is a very democratic process. But that also builds on that. I had a feeling that people would be engaged in quite a holistic approach to a business. And in this case, it turns out that I was right. So I guess without being hubristic, there's a sort of sense of, there's a real sense of positivity come out of that. And the final thing is, we get to make beer. What an amazing success. Okay, and I guess that's my time allotted. So I will hand over to the next person. Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Stu. Yeah, I have to say, since I moved to Scotland in 2007, the array of beer that's now on offer has increased enormously, and I think that's fabulous. So it's great to see that happening in Eigg as well, and hear more about the Eigg story. And I've made quite a few comments as you were speaking, and I know we'll get a few more tips now off Brenda and their experience in terms of crowdfunding, and this whole webinar, I think, is about that tips and experience. So I'll hand over to Brenda and then we'll come back to these questions at the end, but I've already got loads. So if you've got any questions to ask, I suggest you start putting them in the chat as we go through as well. Don't leave the session today with that burning question unanswered. So over to you, Brenda.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm now going to go for the technical part and share my screen. Let's hope it works. Okay, cool. I'm Brenda from Crowdfund Scotland, and I've got a micro business myself. So today I'm sitting in Burnham, coming to you from our eco hostel. So I'm going to talk you through what we do. Now to get the right button. There we go. So a big thank you just to start with. We're at the tail end of European funding. They pay for my job. So that's how I get to coach people. So thank you to Leader. But okay, I want to talk you through what the different types of crowdfunder company are. There's quite a few different types. You may have heard of like Indiegogo and Crowdcube and things. Crowdfunder, we're kind of an organization. We tend to go towards projects that help improve society. We've got a philanthropic bent. So for example, if somebody wanted to maybe come up with a technical project around a drone, if it was technical, we would signpost them to a company maybe like Kickstarter, somebody where people want to actually invest in technology. Whereas we tend to, we're more likely to get a project comes to us where a social enterprise or a charity or a group want to come up with drones that would deliver medication in the glens. So that's the kind of feel that we get. We get a lot of community enterprise groups coming in, businesses, charities, so we get a really wide range. Now, up to date, since we launched in 2013, this gives you a scale of the projects that we've had through. We've had, nearly £137 million raised by people like you. That's not our money, that's your money. And I updated this presentation from February last year. And the last time I checked it in February, it was 80 million. So it just shows you that people have raised a further 57 million in the last 12 months, even during a pandemic. So it's just growing phenomenally as a way for people to raise alternative finance. Now, there are different types of crowdfunding, and we've touched on some of them already today. I'll start with what we're not. sometimes fewer and fewer people are going to the banks to raise money. A lot of them are going out to the crowd and asking people to invest for equity. So that's where they'll go out to crowdfunding platforms like Crowdcube, where they'll sell shares, and that's what the exchange is. Sometimes instead of going to the banks again, they'll go out to the crowd and ask for loans. That's becoming increasingly common. We've got the community shares, and Stu really brought that to life. That was a really lovely example. We do that. So Crowdfund Scotland and Crowdfund UK had worked with Isle of Eigg. We also get to the far left, you got the donations. That's when basically somebody says, will you sponsor me to do a bungee jump? And that's just straightforward. You give a donation, they give a donation to your cause. But our bread and butter is rewards-based crowdfunding. That's what we specialize in. And what that is when people give you money for a project and they get something in return. So a simple example is if you want to open a community cafe, the idea is if somebody makes a donation of £10, they'd get a cup of coffee and a piece of cake in return. And the reason we promote this is because we find people tend to give bigger donations when there's a reward. The average donation across all of our projects, if it's just a straightforward donation, is about £12 per person. If it's the type of project where you can get a reward, it tends to come in at 4 times that amount. So we tend to steer people towards that. A lot of people think, I don't know what we could use as a reward. And we say, well, you can use your products or services, just like Isle of Eigg did. Sometimes people can offer, I spoke to somebody today, they're going to be offering dog training. It can be, you can run events, you can come up with, you wouldn't believe the selection of projects and rewards that people come up with, haircuts, you name it, whatever your community enterprise, social enterprise project is, you can find a reward in it. So why crowdfund? Everybody starts crowdfunding because they need money, and you think that's the only thing you'll get out of it. The money's great, but the other big thing is it's a really good way to test your concept. You can offer, by offering a number of different rewards, you'll quickly get an idea of which ones are more popular. It's a great petri dish to experiment with and tweak your rewards, put different ones in and out. It's really good for raising awareness of your project because it's basically a glorified marketing campaign that aims to get lots of people to make a modest donation. So I always say to people, take a snapshot of your social media following before you start your project, and then do it again at the end, and also measure the amount of interactions, because you're going to have a lot more people aware of what you do at the end of it. And the advocates is because if somebody has motivated me enough to reach my wallet and make a contribution, I'm always going to keep an eye on that project and that business, and I am likely to tell my pals about it. So people who've come in to support you can be really big promoters. The other thing is, at Crowdfunder, we are constantly working with banks and local authorities, all kinds of agencies, who say, if you come across any projects that are related to maybe creative, or it could be, you know, renewables, whatever their topic is, they say, will you let us know when we might be able to match fund that? So I think we're the only crowdfund platform that does that. So that's why you do it. A lot of people think they know how crowdfunding works. They think that what you do is you put a page together, you pop it up on the internet, you go on holidays for 4 weeks and you come back and you're a millionaire. Some people really do believe that. If only it was that simple. What you actually do is you take your project idea, you put a page up on Crowdfunder or whoever you want to go with. And then the important thing is then you tell everybody that you can think of, just as Stuart said there. It's all about getting the word out far and wide. And then the final bit is if people like what you've told them and shown them, then they'll invest. So you have to tend that. Projects tend to run, we generally advise about 4 weeks, 28 days. So when you're running that project, you really do have to nurture it. So we break it down. Success comes down to 3 things. The first being about planning your project. It's really important to put the time in that. The next one is creating a good project page that does justice and communicates your story. A lot of good storytelling involved. And the final bit is there's a whole technique to running your project to get the best results from it. We've got 3 really good wee guides that you can download from the website. They walk you right through this. And we've also got a pile of webinars that we've recorded as well that can talk you right through all of this. But people often ask us what makes a good project, and we'd say that first of all, it's having. We always say try and get a team. If you're doing it on your own, it's hard work just because it's a chunk of work when you're designing it and running it. But other people will bring other skills. You may be a good project manager, but are you also good at writing good copy? Are you good at social media? Are you good at putting together a short video? Try and get some people together to help you. It just brings a lot more skills to the table. Second thing is you need a really good network. The important thing is it's all about getting a lot of people to make a modest donation. So you need to get the word out far and wide. And Isle of Eigg is a really good example of how that works. So you have to really work on building your whole network. And the third thing is you need to have a good story. And you need to be able to tell that story well. Two people can witness the same event, and one will recount it in a way that has you on the edge of your seat. You need somebody who can tell that story well for you. Now, this is there are two ways you can set your project up. All or nothing, like Eigg did, where they basically say to people, we need to raise this money, and all of this money or this project simply won't go ahead. And the reason people do that is sometimes you can't buy half a bridge. Maybe it just won't work any other way. Or sometimes you want to capitalize on that kind of pressure. The other way you can do it is what we call flexible funding, where you say, look, whatever we raise, we'll use that. It's less pressure. People tend to use that more. But Eigg was a really good example of how to go for all or nothing. And it's really important to know about the fees. Whichever company you go with, we're all private companies, even if we are philanthropic. So we have to make our money somewhere. So we say to people, budget for about 3% for admin fees paid to crowdfunding, because that funds all of our back of house and the whole website. And we say allow about 2% for Stripe, who handle all the finance. So we say if you need to raise £100, then aim to raise 105, because that will cover your costs. So it's always really important, whoever you work with, to find out what the fees are. And we do one-to-one coaching if you're in the leader areas. Go onto our website, have a really good nosy at all of the projects that were there. You'll learn an awful lot from looking at other people. And the last thing is, if you want to find out more, just drop us an email at scotland@crowdfunder.co.uk. And that is us. We'll do our best to help. And I think I'm back in the room. And I think I come in just under 10 minutes.
Yep. Thank you very much, Brenda. That was great. So many useful tips. I've got lots of things I've been writing down as everyone's been speaking. Last but not least, I'm delighted to welcome Louise to our session today. I'm going to be going through Louise's slides as she tells me. So it's you just have to point that out to me. And really delighted, because we really wanted to get the sense from people that have been there and done that as well. So really looking forward to hearing from Louise. And I'll just get your presentation up.
Can you hear me? I hope you can. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. I'm sorry, it is not an ideal situation. I'm in the car. We've got a family medical thing going on, and Elsa is homeschool next to me here. But this kind of fits with our crowdfunder story, because it's all a lot about timing. So that's me there with our mate Sir Dave and my business partner Sarah. Sarah's hair. Check out Sarah's hair. Isn't it gorgeous? It's actually also an important part of our story, and we'll come back to that later. I'm an Aussie with my Scozzy daughter next to me, married to a Scot. So just to put that to one side, because I know otherwise we've got some accent guessing going on. Sarah and I grew up on the other side of the world from each other, but both with sticks in our hair, muddy knees, up trees, all of that. And we both really love the beach. And that's a big part of why we set up Lil. In our previous jobs, we worked together as consultants on a marine conservation charity project, even before lovely Sir Dave brought out Blue Planet 2. We were shocked at how much our consumer actions were directly leading to ocean pollution. We dreamed a lot about what we would do about it if we could. Blue Planet 2 came out, and we decided we had to take the leap now. And so that was in 2018. We began by selling loo rolls to friends on the school run, and since then we have delivered more than 3,000 zero waste orders through our online zero waste. We have attended over 100 community events running outreach and education in sustainability, and we've prevented over 1 million bits of plastic from polluting our world. And we did all of that from our spare room at home. You can go to the next slide, please, Naomi. Oh, sorry, so that's an example there of some of our outreach that we've done and some of our products. And then, yep, the ones go up back to the cardboard boxes. If we can, the third, yes, there we go. That is Sarah and I working from our spare room. It was starting to send us a bit spare, particularly in the first lockdown. As a behaviour change organisation, we've always tried to keep our overheads really low for food and essentials. And in lockdown, we had toilet paper and pasta. We were popular. We had lots of orders to do, and we were washing our faces, but not much more. Because of all the events that were cancelled, we lost more than £20,000 in trading revenue. And yeah, we were working every single hour under the sun and then some, and certainly not for minimum wage, not making profit, and not able to bring in volunteers or staff because we were both home working. And then all of the fun, Sarah was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. So you can see in the photo there, those locks are gone and she's got her cozy hat on. Crowdfunder was something that had been on our radar for a long time, from when we started really, but we were never really sure what we were asking or what we were doing, or it just didn't really feel like the right time for us. And then all of a sudden we realised that we just couldn't go on. It was definitely the time to do it. We needed to move out of our spare rooms into an external hub, somewhere where we could build a team, importantly, have all the products in one place, and do more of our engagement and outreach work that we love. So we did just as Brenda advised. We emailed Scotland to Crowdfunder, and we got a coach in Kirsty who really helped us start to pull a plan together and begin to build the Lil Hub crowdfunding campaign. We go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the final slide of our video. A video, as the crowdfunding coaches will tell you, is a really important part of what you do. My background is in journalism. I have done some broadcast work and TV, but my gosh, it's so hard writing and filming yourself and doing it from your phone. Build that network as much as you can. We worked on this script so long. We tried to make it perfect, and it still wasn't perfect. If you get a chance to look at it later, you can hear tractors in the background when I'm talking. It's all a bit full on. I really like Stu's advice to make it as professional as you can. Ours was a bit more homespun, but I think it also showed the need for what we were doing. We spent so long though getting everything right that we missed our first planned launch date, which had been carefully scheduled around kids' school holidays, Sarah's chemo treatment, paydays, Christmas purchasing, and then there was an unscheduled bit where Sarah got an infection and was properly unwell for a while. It turns out that was the time to launch the crowdfunding campaign. It was mental. Sarah had a post on LinkedIn of Q, when is a good time to launch a crowdfunding campaign? During a global pandemic, in the run-up to Christmas, and during breast cancer treatment. Well, hell, there's no time like the present, right? And she was absolutely right. We were buoyed by that planning work that we'd done with Kirsty, our crowdfunding coach, and with our team, and a mantra that we could only do what we could do. So this bit here is one of those social media bits with the Pudding Girls. We wrote in extras for the videos. We did what we could there too. And if we can go to the next slide, please, Naomi. As has been talked about, we spent a lot of time thinking about our rewards. Because we're a retailer, we don't produce anything. So if we were to give products as rewards, it was going to cost us at least usually half of what someone was giving us. And so every reward, all of a sudden, we're having to raise something like £50,000 just to get effectively a warehouse was all we needed. And people are thinking that we're taking the mick. It's not good investment for them. We're not good at doing money, that kind of stuff. So we had to think really creatively around our rewards. One way that we did that was by going out to our friendly business community and pretty much asking for raffle prizes. They knew us by then, they knew what we did, or we went out with a particular ask, and these were some of the ones we got. We got some early no's to that, so that was before we'd even started the crowdfunding campaigns, asking hospitality businesses for free stuff during the pandemic. It was really awful, but some of them really did want to support us, and we wanted to give them that opportunity. And in hindsight, those early no's really helped us refine our ask and refine our way of telling our story. There's a doorway there that you can see going through to a green garden. That was our partner's Fantasy Organic Market Garden, who donated a free tour. So that only cost them a little bit of staff time. Someone paid 150 quid for it, and we got a great benefit from that. We've also got there some Spice Pots, which is a business in Haddington, some artwork, and we had a really good support from the local surfing schools and those kinds of things to help us do that. So going out to partners for that meant that we got to keep all of the reward money, or most of the reward money, and also it helped our comms plan, the daily comms that Stuart was talking about. It meant we could focus on our business partners, show that we were part of the community, not have the focus just on us all the time. Some other businesses offered online workshops themselves, and they went down really well too. We looked around at what other people like us were doing, and lots of them had a great success doing events or workshops. We offered some of those, that they weren't great sellers in 2020. No one was willing to commit to coming to an event, even for some date in the future. With help from Crowdfunder, our best reward was that we offered a significant discount offer. So we found that hard. As we said, we don't have a big profit margin, so we're giving away money that we need to get this hub going. And so we had a really careful think about it, and I've offered 10% off all of your purchases for 2021, but we charge 50 quid for it as a reward. And so that means that by the time it's starting to cost us money, a customer has spent £500 with us. It means that our really loyal customer base that invested in that are literally invested in us, and it also attracted new customers who are very much part of our team now. Overall, if we can go to the next slide, please, Naomi. We found that by doing the crowdfunder, it gave us a bit of a shield and helped us to be brave and make more ask, to feel more comfortable about going out and getting those ego-denting no's. We pushed ourselves out there more because it was the window we had to do it. We found it hard too, as Stu said, there was a lot of media that aren't interested in supporting the crowdfunder journey. They want to hear about the success story at the end. So it was a lot of no's, but so many lovely yeses from our community, big and small donations, comments, social shares. They still really buoy us up now as we're getting through it. So this slide here shows that we did it. We got £8,000, which wasn't our target, but if we can go to the next slide, while this was going on, we knew that we would also need some corporate support. And so we sent out a lot of requests to corporate partners to come on board and give us what they could. We had some rewards that were targeted to corporate partners, and 4Day Studios, our major donors, have a base just along the road from us. They're actually customers as well, and which is why we had chosen them to ask them. So all of those no's, all those emails and late nights sent out requesting emails all fade into the background. And it was an insane conversation where they're like, but this is what, we can do that. That's what you need. Yeah, we'll do that. We love what you guys do. And it was that simple. It was mind-blowing, really. So while our crowdfunder total didn't reach its original aim, we the 8,000 on top of what 4Day have given us, we have exceeded in fundraising terms what we originally set out to do. So it's that broadening of our network, all of that kind of stuff has really come out and helped us a lot. So that's I think the last slide. We're now in the terrifying position of having to make it all a reality. We're negotiating a lease. But what we've done so far is opened up other doors. We're able to get some Kickstarter paperwork in that we wouldn't have been able to do from home working. We've had more people volunteer with us. We've got more networks because of the crowdfunder too. And the most important end to the story is that Sarah is cancer-free and her red hair has come back. She's sporting some lovely pixie locks at the moment. So that's us.
Thank you so much, Louise. And you've already answered what was going to be my first question, which is...
How's Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that was really good to hear, and I know everyone will want to know. But actually, what was really interesting, and I hope what people have got out of this session today, from yourself, from Stu, and from people that advise people, is that sense of kind of how to best get that message across. And you know what I've got a sense of from today's webinar, and please put some questions through if you've got them, but is actually there's lots of expert advice out there that you can go to, whether that's Community Shares Scotland, if you're going down the Community Shares route, or Crowdfunding Scotland, that experience and insights there. But the other bit I'm really picking up on is actually don't be afraid to share that kind of what's that personal story that you bring to this as well. And that's what I picked up both in this, but also when Stu was talking about kind of how do you capitalise on the community buyout and the Eigg story, and what's that real personal thing that you bring to this? It was quite interesting. So I've put down a few kind of questions as we've gone through, and I don't know if Stu's still there. Stu, really good to have you back with us. So I always when Toby and I have done webinars in the past together, we always used to, I guess, ask the key questions on the difference between community shares and crowdfunding. And I think we've kind of, hopefully we've shown that a bit today in the presentations. So I'm not going to do my usual request to Toby of the usual question I ask. But I wanted to pick up on one of the other things that often comes through is this thing about rewards, and everyone's spoken about it in terms of what's the offer back. And as you were all speaking, I was thinking back in terms of hearing from another speaker, and he's not here, so I won't say what their business was, but he said that actually they came up with a whole list of rewards, and one was actually in the end about, it was actually another beer product, I'll say that much. So it was about, you know, the reward at the end was about sharing a beer with the person that set up the company. He said it was funny, he said there was almost an awkward moment where someone had bid in for it, but no one quite knew what to say. So they were trying to be really creative on what their rewards were. And then when it came to actually deliver them, a bit like, this is actually a bit strange. And the people who won it had to travel miles just to come and meet the founder of the company. And actually what transpired was ultimately they'd have all probably just preferred to have been sent a bit more beer in the post and done it in a slightly different way. So I wondered if there's just, and you touched on it, I guess, in terms of some rewards that didn't work, but I wonder if there's just any expertise on the panel of were there any rewards that you thought of and then kind of went, actually, no, that's a bit daft? Or were there any real rewards that you've seen that have tried that haven't worked? And I'll perhaps ask Stu first, and then maybe bring in Brenda and Toby, and then if there's anything you want to add, Louise, come back in as well. So Stu, were there any rewards that you kind of thought of and then thought, nah? Or were there any rewards that you tried that just didn't go as you thought they might?
Well, there was a massive level of practicality. You know, we live on an island, and beer's quite heavy. You know, it's quite heavy to send out, and we're doing it almost parallel with when Brewdog were doing it as well. And I was quite conscious of the way their approach was to offer gifts, but then to the person who was buying these things were actually also having to pay for postage. And so that, to me, that was kind of defeating the whole thing. Really, we brainstormed. We spent a long time brainstorming what we would give. Outlandish things, you know, like a rhino at one stage, and then we had to work out where we get a rhino from and whether that was actually acceptable. And it kind of came down to both practicality, but also I think further commitment. So from our point of view, I'm now like fully planning permission, building warrants, building a building. I was a bit late earlier because I was looking at foundations, and that's totally out of my mindset, in the same way that crowdfunding was totally out of my mindset. And we knew this would be the situation before we went into it. So what we want is things that are really easy to deal with. So t-shirts worked really well for us. It was a really practical t-shirt approach. I know that Boundary Brewing over in Northern Ireland, when they did it, they effectively relied on t-shirts. I think they're the sort of the heart of crowdfunding, perhaps. And beer, but beer when people arrive, when people come, and we'll store that for a period of time. But I think there's also a level of investment we found it's down to people won't. You're not going to get people to move from investing £250 to investing £5,000 with a t-shirt and a free beer. So what we found was that there was a real requirement to make a clear differentiation between investors. So £100, £250, a case of beer, a t-shirt, and people are engaged with that. £5,000, a t-shirt's not going to change their minds about something, and so there needs to be a broader avenue there, and we found tax relief was really the leverage from that point of view.
No, thank you, Stu. I'll come back to tax relief in a minute, because we're actually running a webinar, and I'm just getting Duncan actually to look up the date for me, because it's in the next few weeks specifically on social investment tax relief. So if people want to know more about that, we're going to run a very particular session on that. I think it's interesting that you touched on that jump, and I'll bring Brenda in a minute, but the other bit I picked up, and I guess that's the brewery tours, I guess, that you did, or the day of brewery. And even as Louise was speaking, is actually there's a basic level in terms of what people are interested in the product, but actually they're really buying into you as the entrepreneur and the business as well, and getting that across. So that's the other bit I'm really picking up. Brenda, is there anything from your experience in terms of things that haven't worked, or hot tips?
I always say to people, get a big long wish list of what you could put in, and then be strategic about what you put out when. So when I worked with Burnham Arts, and they ran an absolutely cracking crowdfunder in their community enterprise, so have a look. I always describe it, use your rewards like a box of fireworks. You can put them all out at the one go and just go one big bang, or you can release them and tease them. So one of the things they did was, I said, sell your bread and butter stuff you want to shift. Like if you do 10 quid, get you a cup of tea and a bun, people always bring somebody with them. I said, what else do you want to shift that isn't moving as much? They wanted people to hire their rooms. So they wound up being able to sell a dance studio and ceramics a lot. The big earners were things like the hall. It's good, like Stuart said, if you can get the big ticket ones, because there's a lot less admin. You can be reactive. If you find something's going well, then respond to that. So when I worked with a hotel up north that had a distillery attached to it, when we realized that a few people were coming in at the high end of £1,000 for their rewards, I said, who are these people? And they said, they're international whiskey collectors. And I said, so you can sell the same product to them twice if you give them a slight variation on it. So when we realized that they were hungry for that, I said, focus on that bit and develop it. So you have the big long list, see what works, and then develop that more. But another interesting one was when I worked with the Bothy Bakery up near Aviemore, and they said, we don't really have much to sell. I mean, there's only so many variations on a cake. And I said, did you not bring out that really good cookbook? And they said, yeah. And I said, have you got any gathering dust? And I said, they went and looked in the cupboard and said, yeah, we've got 150. And I said, flog them. And I said, what about those nice aprons you're wearing? Have you got any of those? And so they looked around, and one of the best things they came up with was, I said, KJ, the owner, she's a really well-known cook. And I said, how about if you do exclusive online sessions where you get 2 or 3 people in and you cook with her? So they all worked well. The one thing I found tricky to shift when we did the one in Dunkeld and Burnham was somebody offered very exclusive accommodation, and they wanted a reserve price on it because they didn't want anybody coming in and getting it for a gift, because it undermined their business. And we were having to deal with the ego of that person. It was very, very kind of them, but we had to manage that on top of everything else. So we held it back and used it for a raffle after the crowdfunder. So.
No, thank you, Brenda. It's, again, really useful to hear. And Toby, I guess from your experience, you know, how are rewards used in the community shares model? And if so, is it any different, or how have they been used where they have?
Yeah, I think with most community share offers, it tends to be a lot simpler than the crowdfunders that Brenda's talking about. I think the main reward tends to be that people can withdraw their money eventually. So if someone puts £100 in, the idea is that once the business is up and established, they'll get that £100 back. You then have the option to offer interest. So for example, Stu's offering 1.5 interest. 1.5% interest with Eigg, and some share offers, especially the more kind of commercial ones like energy schemes, tend to offer higher interest, up to say 5%. I think when you do have a share offer that's trying to launch an actual product, so for example, Eigg Brewery is a good example. There's Glenmore's Distillery as well, which is selling whiskey. You know, if there is an actual product that people will eventually get, I think people do want to know they're going to get it eventually, and I think it does help to, you know, if you're trying to raise money for a brewery, offer free beer. If you're trying to raise money for a bakery, offer free bread, because people do want the physical product as well. But I think in most cases, community share offers are much simpler. They're just mostly about the shares and the financial side of things, and there's not a reward in the same sense as others.
Thank you. That probably does bring us back to one of my questions I always ask, which is what are some of the differences between community shares and mainstream crowdfunding, and maybe that is one of the slight differences. I'm interested, I guess, in terms of everyone. I think, Stu, you spoke quite a lot about planning and preparation, and I wrote down the kind of the 6 Ps, and I wrote down the very the formal version, the proper prior planning prevents poor performance. And you'll have probably heard a similar one that I'm not going to say on the webinar, but really just thinking that through. Was there anything in terms of your initial planning, and I'm thinking back to what Brenda was just saying about not being frightened to just change the ask. Was there any stuff that you did in your initial planning that you also had to do in terms of adapting and changing?
Most of it. Really. Planning is really important, and it gives you almost the area that you're going to be ploughing into when you come to pick up your plough, if you allow that poor metaphor. But really, I think what you're creating is sort of parameters with which you can work in and which you can bounce around within. And if you know what those parameters are, so for us, it was very much, it distilled everything down to three key things. And it meant that when we were trying to sell it, because that's what essentially you're doing, we could be very clear on what we were selling. And that's the importance. It was about, and this takes longer, I imagine, or shorter for different people. For me, it took 6 months. Until it actually dropped properly, and then it was a lot easier further down the line. Planning is really, I guess, preparing a future ground that you can't really see, rather than actually the ground that you're on at that point.
No, it's interesting. I always think that even if you've planned everything and it doesn't go as you thought, you've at least done the pre-thinking, so that when you suddenly have to make a quicker decision, you've almost done your research to enable you to do quick decision making as you go through, even if the plan itself that you put out doesn't work. And I'm conscious of time, and I've still got quite a few more questions. I know Louise is going to have to drop off, but thank you, Louise, for joining us. I know we'll end up having you back on, I'm sure. In terms of repeat crowdfunding, that was just, I guess the question I'll come to for you, Stu, is would you do it again? But perhaps first I'll just ask both Brenda and Toby to just say, have you found people have kind of used multiple stages of crowdfunding in terms of perhaps startup and then growth, and how have they perhaps changed what they've done at each stage? Toby?
Yeah, we have a few examples of community groups who've done multiple share offers. It's perfectly possible. They're allowed to do it. I think it can get a little bit complicated, and you do need to be quite careful about how you structure it. I think especially if you've done a big share offer and you've offered people investment on certain terms, and then you go out and offer more shares 2 years later, some of the original shareholders might be annoyed that, you know, the new shareholders are getting different terms or things like that. So you do have to be careful about how you communicate it with members. And I think it does work best where it's for really specific things. So for example, Glenwithus Distillery, which I've mentioned a few times, they did an initial share offer to get themselves up and running and to help with some development costs. And then they did a bigger open share offer where they got in even more money to help with the actual build of the distillery. And I think that where you have that kind of delineation really helps. And it does just mean you have to be a little bit careful with ongoing admin of the benefits that certain members get and things like that. But it is possible, and we do have examples of that happening.
No, thank you, Toby. And Brenda, in your experience, people that have used them multiple times?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is when I speak to people at the end of a project, and Crowdfunder encourages us as staff to run Crowdfunder, so I've done it myself. Everybody says that at the end of it, they've learned so much that they kind of wish they'd known at the start, which reflects what Stu was saying about, you know, you make a good plan, all goes out the window. But I've worked with quite a few projects where they've run 2 or 3 crowdfunders, because once you've gone through it, you know what you're dealing with. So as long as what Toby was saying, if you've got a specific thing, like I worked with a bird garden down in the Borders, and the first time they needed an enclosure for flaminglings, baby flamingos, and then they went back again when they needed another piece of work in their garden. So they were always specific about what they needed it for, but they started to get a reputation for doing that, and they just used that. So it's not at all unusual to do it that way. Just be specific about what you're using the money for.
Thank you, Brenda. Stu, would you do it again?
I think I agree with what Brenda and Toby have been saying. If there was anything that we specifically needed that was essential, and that we hadn't, from my point of view, we raised so much more than we had not intended but required. This is the real test of my business plan, without wanting to get too hubristic about it. But to me, from me specifically, it would be a failure of my business plan if I was to crowdfund again for the brewery, unless there was a specific thing that was completely nuanced that came out of the blue, in which case, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. And I've got one last question, because I'm conscious we always say we'll finish at 12:30 and I'm already slightly over. And I guess it's obviously, Toby, you talked about kind of 5% interest. Now, those of you that do follow bank rates will know that at the moment, if you have got savings, that's a lot more than the bank. What do you think we should be doing perhaps as a sector at the moment in terms of, I look at things like the energy sector, which obviously we've got COP26 coming, we've got lots of interest, I guess, in environment, and Stu, you talked about that, I think, in terms of what people are interested in. Is there more we should be doing as a sector to encourage more communities to look at those kind of environmental stance approaches, but also perhaps make the stronger commercial links in terms of potential interest and reward back to investors at a point when actually 5% is looking pretty good?
Yeah, I think it's tricky with community shares because community benefit societies they're allowed to offer interest, but it's capped and they can't offer. 5% is probably the highest I've ever seen it, and that is for energy schemes with really, really forecastable income. I think if there was more risk, you can't really justify offering that sort of level. I think the FCA are fairly strict about interest. It's sort of defined as being, it has to be the maximum interest required to attract investment. And I think it's just over time become accepted that green energy projects do need these huge sums of money, and they need people to put in, potentially thousands of pounds each, so that interest is required. Whereas a smaller community focused group, quite often share offers at community level don't offer any interest at all. So there's a tricky balance there, and I think the interest should never be the kind of primary reason that somebody invests in a share offer. It should always be that they want to support what's happening, and that they want to see it go ahead.
Thank you. And I guess in essence, that's what social enterprise is all about. It's all about that local social and environmental impact as well. And I think Stu, again, you spoke about kind of making it, that kind of business, I guess, in terms of your linking in has been much more than GDP. And in essence, that's what our sector is all about. So really important to keep that in mind. We've had loads of really positive feedback on today's session. You'll see it in the chat, but people have really found it useful. I know we've run this topic before, but I sense it's going to be something we come back to again in the future. It's something people are really interested in, I think, and particularly as we look at community renewal. So just in case anyone's got any just last closing comments they wanted to just make at the end of the session, I'll go to Brenda, Toby, and then Stu.
Yeah, it was just to come back to the climate change thing. That's kind of what my background is. And I know that Crowdfunder is starting to work with a lot more local authorities around the country, where they're coming in with a pot of money to kind of stimulate climate change and sustainability type projects. And a lot of the time it is social and community enterprises and small businesses that will go into this. So I know that we've got one going down in Cornwall at the minute, and we've had one down in Plymouth, but we're working with councils in Scotland to see if we can get them to come up with some match funding so we can help all kinds of businesses come on board for climate change. So watch this space. Sounds
really interesting. Toby, any final thoughts from you?
I think I would just reiterate how much support is available. I mean, we have our programme of support, which is completely funded and at no cost to groups who access it. We also work really closely with likes of the Plunkett Foundation, Cooperative Development Scotland, the Development Trust Association. I think in Scotland we're really lucky that there's such a huge kind of network of support that's out there. So if you do have a business idea, if you do have an organisation that you're thinking about setting up, speak to any of these groups and they can put you in touch with the right people, because there's so much help available.
Thank you, Toby. And again, we're always happy to try and signpost people as well. Stu, any final thoughts? I'm interested to know whether you're doing IPAs or stouts and when it's all available. So any information on that would be great for me.
Yes and yes in answer to those questions. I think that possibly the most important thing that the sort of spine of our campaign and our business is ownership, and that really tries to root everything together, and that would be and how to share that ownership, which is what would be my sort of closing remarks. We're hoping to have the brewery, Blue Sky Thinking, the brewery up and selling beer by July. I like Blue Sky Thinking.
You've got to have a vision.
You do, yeah, sell it.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. That was a great session. For those of you who've got a real interest in social investment tax relief and want to talk tax, do come. I think Duncan's put the link in our chat. It's the 24th of March. We all thought we might lose social investment tax relief in the budget, but it was renewed. So looking forward to kind of running that session. We'll make tax interesting, just like we make our webinars hopefully interesting every week. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much to all of our speakers. And we will share out copies of the slides from today. So thank you all. Have a good day.